The Baltimore Ravens have Lamar Jackson missing practice yet again. We touched on what that could mean next for us here on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show.
I'm Kadri Ismail, Super Bowl champion, and there is the magic word or phrase, I should say. They are in control of their own destiny. The Ravens still have their playoff hopes alive.
And with that, it is now or never for the Baltimore Ravens. I'm Kevin Oestreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens. And if Baltimore wants to make the playoffs, their journey has to begin right now. We talk about all that and more coming up on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show.
Rise and shine. It's the Ravens Squad. Everything Baltimore Ravens every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of Charm City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Flock together and squad up. The Ravens Squad Show starts now.
What is going on, Ravens flock? Welcome to another edition of the Locked On Ravens Squad Show, the best squad show around and the number one sports podcast network out there. Myself, Sam Njoku, joining you with Kevin Oestreicher and Kadri Ismail as the Ravens get ready for a rematch with the Cincinnati Bengals after losing to them just 2 weeks ago. The Ravens get another crack at dethroning, I won't say dethroning, but putting down Joe Burrow once and for all, giving that Bengals team 10 losses on the season. Ravens got a chance to do that, but they need to do it without Lamar Jackson in practice yet again. On Wednesday, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the pressure that continues to mount for this Ravens team as they get set to hopefully get a string of games together and reclaim the AFC North title once again. We'll preview that Ravens-Bengals matchup. That is, we talk about must-win games. This is literally a must-win game if they have any chance of winning the division. I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Again, Q and Kevin joining me here on the show. Kevin, Lamar Jackson misses practice yet again, but wasn't really designated with an injury. No toe, no ankle. It was a rest day, according to John Harbaugh. Lamar Jackson gets a bit of rest as he prepares for his matchup against the Bengals. How do you feel about that, knowing that not really an injury designation, but just another rest day here for Lamar?
Yeah, it's great he's not on the injury report with an injury this time. That's a positive step in the right direction, I guess. But feels like, this is the new norm for Lamar Jackson, where he'll miss a day. And, how banged up is he? How banged up is he not? It feels like we've been having that conversation for the better part of almost the entire season at this point. But I think it's interesting because a lot of the conversations I think about this situation have shifted. And honestly, what's gotten more attention about it, and Q, I'm interested to hear your answer on this, is, multiple media outlets and people just talking about how much Lamar Jackson's absence not only means for Lamar Jackson during a regular practice day, but for the rest of the offense. Because, there have been former coaches that have talked about it, former players that have talked about it, about how essentially for the offense things coming down to the timing of the field between starter and receiver. Tyler Huntley's not Lamar. He has different things that he's comfortable with as opposed to Lamar, and the timings are different, and the feel that he has with receivers is different. So, practice is practice at the end of the day, but at the same time, it's also not nothing. So, I'd assume he'd be back at practice tomorrow. I don't really want to assume anything anymore with this team because we've seen so many things happen over the course of the season. I'm not sure what to expect anymore, but I'd assume he's back. But Q, I'm curious, especially with your career, and I'm sure you've had your quarterbacks miss practice at times over the course of your career. Was it any different? Was it a big deal? Was it not a big deal? And how can you relate that back to kind of what the Ravens are going through with Lamar missing at least one day of practice? He hasn't had a full week of practice since week 10.
Yeah, so that's the issue, the fact that it's a consistent thing, and in that consistency, we've seen the inconsistency. In other words, when we've seen before Lamar Jackson not missing practices, going out there doing his thing, there's a certain rhythm and timing to the offense that, in my mind, it's great, it's perfect, it's what you need to do. But then at the same time, from a bigger picture standpoint, okay, you're looking at going all the way back to the Miami game where they've really just straight struggled with any level of consistency with his passing. You've seen where he's had, throws in the dirt, had throws high, had throws behind guys, just the inaccuracy. Obviously, we know the woes of the offensive line. And so his, ability to kind of sense and feel how to move around in the pocket, uh, all of it is it's because of him not being able to be out there consistently, I think has shown itself. And that's where, for me, I would be a little bit hesitant because of the fact that he doesn't have his offensive line out there ready to go, slash his receivers out there ready to go with him during 7-on-7, during team, during install of inside run, back to the wall offense, red zone offense, and what that looks like. You go over all those things, and by missing time, you miss time and chemistry with your guys.
You're absolutely right. You sure do. And that's my big qualm about the whole thing. I understand you want to make sure that he's healthy enough to play. You got a better chance of winning with Lamar than without Lamar, but it seems like reps are what this team is missing. At least that's the only thing I could put my finger on. He wasn't the only one dealing with injuries out there. Keaton Mitchell, who, had that knee injury during the game. Thank goodness it doesn't appear to be serious. He was able to get out there and practice today. Injuries don't seem to be the issue anymore coming into this game as opposed to earlier in the season. It still seems like they're missing something. They are finding a way to get the job done. Q, do you see an avenue in which Lamar Jackson can get back on track? He looked a little better in that Steelers matchup other than in weeks prior, but still seems like he's a couple of notches away from being back to where he was in week one against the Bills. That's where everyone looks to, that week one matchup where he was able to put points on the board. The offense was humming, but since then they've slowly regressed, and some of that's due to injury.
Yeah, you know what? I think, his chemistry is off. We do see week one was he's going to be awesome. We're going to see this guy go out there and be Lamar Jackson, be Superman, be able to make the dynamic play, the dynamic throw. The hit that he took since the week one game has been that bad, to the point where I think it is just a cumulative effect of the wear and tear of this year for Lamar Jackson. And so now we're at the point where we're like, all right, what are we going to do? How is this going to help the team move along? We got to figure out how to rest him, but yet at the same time, we got to figure out how to build the chemistry during the week of practice. And the mental reps is something that you would look at and think that, okay, we're going to take a lot of mental reps. And a veteran team, yeah, you can do that. But for whatever the reason, you're not seeing that, especially when you look at the last 2 weeks. We've seen kind of some of the up and down, but these last 2 weeks, we've seen more down than up. And so desperate times, you lose this game, you might as well just go ahead and call it a U-Haul game type season where everybody's ready to go back to their off-season home and they got the U-Haul packed up, ready to go. So that's how important this game is for this Ravens ball club going up to Cincinnati.
Yeah, it's massive. And, while veteran players, again, Lamar doesn't need practice to play, realistically, and even hypothetically, he doesn't need to take all these reps in order to go out there on the field and perform. But like we've talked about, the timing of stuff is important. Getting reps in with your guys is important. But of course, I do think that priority number one is making sure that he is at his best for Sundays on game day. So if that does come at the expense of a practice day every single week, so be it. But again, the situation, much like a lot of other situations, Q, you and I talked this morning about how weird that Carl Lawson situation was, and CJ Gardner-Johnson and some of these injuries that this team has suffered. We still don't really know what injuries Lamar has suffered outside of his hamstring, because that was a big, hey, he's going to miss a lot of time injury, but we don't know, did he suffer a sprained toe? What leg is that on? What happened with his ankle? Did he just twist it? Did he fall on it weird? I guess with the foot injury, we know that someone stepped on him. So I guess at least we know that aspect of it, but you just don't really know. So again, if the if the trade-off is Lamar's feeling better on Sunday because he has to miss Wednesday, okay, I can live with that because I know Lamar doesn't need practice to play. But at the same time, I also understand the importance of it. And, to your point, Q, like, yeah, I mean, the season's done if you lose this game. It's already, you're on your back foot right now with that Pittsburgh loss, trying to claw out. And realistically, you probably have to win out, or at the very minimum, go 3-1 if you get a lot of help from Pittsburgh. But, like I'm a Denver Nuggets fan. And one of the things when they were going through their losing, like their bad losing in like 2012 is at the end of the season when they were just ready for the year to be over, they were recorded in huddles going like 1, 2, 3 Cancun, like 1, 2, 3, like,
No way.
yeah, like one day closer to the season being over. And, it kind of felt like that earlier in the season, right, guys, where we were wondering like, man, this team doesn't look like they're having fun out there. It doesn't look like, they're enjoying their time on the field. Everything's terrible. And then we sort of saw them get their joy back a little bit over the middle of the season. They're winning games, but now it just feels like the frustration is boiling over on the sidelines at times, and obviously, look, losing isn't fun. I'm not going to sit here and say that, yeah, they're losing, they should be chipper. No, of course not. They're going to be frustrated with losing, but it just feels like something is off again, where it felt like things were starting to turn and now it's off again. I know that this team is still motivated. I know this team is still trying to win. I know they're not giving up. I'm not trying to insinuate any of that, but what I am saying is that, like, in order for them to win, everybody has to be playing to their best and their potential. And right now we know that offensive line has been a consistent thorn in the offensive side, a consistent thorn in Lamar Jackson's side. You see drops, you see guys catching balls out of bounds, you see turnovers, you see Lamar missing throws at points, like weird play calling. It just seemed like they were starting to turn a corner, but here's the harsh reality of the situation. They weren't playing great teams during that turnaround. This was the test where you had, and Q and I, we talked about it this morning, you had an opportunity on that 5-game win streak with 2 AFC North foes stare you in the face with Cincinnati and Pittsburgh to really take hold of the division, to really show that, yeah, no, we were playing those teams that weren't great well because we have found it and we are the team that we showed we could be in 2024, 2023. But the reality that they have shown us is that maybe they're just not that good this season. And it might not even be a maybe anymore. In some instances, they're just not that good this season. And what that game against Pittsburgh told me, unfortunately, is that neither of those teams are going very far in the playoffs, in my opinion, at this rate, the way they're going. They could have a miraculous turnaround. They could have the inverse of what happened in 2012, 2013, when they limped into the postseason and then they went on the miraculous run. But you know what they did that year? They made an O-line change. They made an O-line change that year. Bryant McKinney comes in. They move guys around. And it just feels like they just want to go down with the ship. They want to go down with the ship this year with personnel decisions and other things. And, hey, we're going to do our thing. We don't listen to outside noise. Not listening to outside noise is fine. A lot of organizations don't do it. They operate the way they want to operate. But at some point, it becomes a problem where you have to question, what are you seeing on that football field that everybody else in the world isn't seeing at some of these positions? And that's where it becomes more of a topic of conversation.
Isn't it interesting, too, because they're saying how some way, some form or another, I know Jeff Zrebeck was talking about it, that he was asking guys in a locker room, who's the other guys that are in this room that can replace the guard play? Who are the better players? Do you have other guys? And he was saying that, hey, we got the best 5 out there. Even John has hinted on to that we got our best 5 guys out there. So if you got your best 5 guys out there, the trade deadline came and went nothing. At the same time, bigger picture wise, in the offseason, who's responsible for scouting out the guys that are offensive linemen and who are, the ultimate decision makers in putting together an offensive and defensive line? To be honest with you, defensive line has woefully underperformed as well. So both sides, that's where it's like, this there's more to it than just, oh, they're playing bad, but how do we get here? Because you should have seen this when it came to training camp when it came to preseason, you should have figured it out and you should have made moves to prevent this just pretty much huge letdown of a season. And, to your point, Brian McKinney had to get in shape. That was the thing that, everybody was talking about. He had to prove that he could hang in the 2-minute offense and not break down. And rubber met the road. He did that. He stood up and was able to, show that he was in shape. And that's where he got his chance and got in there, and the rest was history. Defensively, they had to clean some things up. The late Art Jones was talking about how Ed Reed was talking to him to motivate him to play better. You had leadership within that locker room that were, clearly Hall of Fame leaders, but at the same time, this is a scenario of like, all right, well, what's going on? When is this all going to change?
When is it going to change indeed? And change may be coming. When we come back, we'll take a look at what pressure is mounting for the Ravens, how much of that could culminate in actual change in the upcoming offseason. We'll touch on all of this and a lot more next on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. There's no reason to let big wireless drain your wallet, especially during the holidays. Right now, Mint Mobile is running their best deal of the year. All of their unlimited plans are 50% off. That means you can lock in 3, 6, or even 12 months of unlimited premium wireless for just $15 a month. It's the easiest way to take your overpriced phone bill and give it to the full Scrooge treatment. And what makes this even better is how simple Mint makes the switch. No contracts, no nonsense, just real savings and real quality services. Switching to Mint lets you keep your same coverage for a lower price. The service is fast and super reliable, even on the go. Turn your expensive wireless present into a huge wireless savings future by switching to Mint. Shop Mint Unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Limited time offer, upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months. Plan required, $15 a month equivalent. Taxes and fees. Initial plan terms only. Greater than 35 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com. We are back here, Locked On Ravens Squad Show. Myself, Kevin, Q. Feeling kind of negative out here, but it is the way it is because of the way the Ravens are performing. Want to let you guys know that if you want to, make sure that you guys like and subscribe if you're watching over on YouTube. If you're listening, wherever you listen to your podcast, be sure to give us 5 stars. Let your friends know about the Ravens Squad Show. We're starting to get more active here, more members of the Ravens flock coming to this stream. So appreciate those of you who are first timers and welcoming new and exciting Ravens fans to talk Ravens football here with us at the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. The Ravens are in a bit of a pickle here. The Ravens failed to get the job done against the Steelers, and now on the outside looking in at the division, hope is not completely lost as they do have a chance to get a win here against the Bengals. Hope for some help from the opposing teams that are battling it with the Steelers, and maybe, just maybe, get a chance at a Week 18 showdown with the playoffs on the line, something that Kevin predicted earlier in the season. So not out of the realm of possibility for the Ravens. Need to get something going here. But the national media have really got their paws here on this Ravens team. We've seen guys like Shannon Sharp, former Raven, Super Bowl 35 winner, along with Kadri, getting in on his own show, talking about the feelings of this offensive line. We've had people on Fox Sports, ESPN, everyone's talking about how the shift of concern should go from Mike Tomlin to John Harbaugh as far as being able to sustain employment here the following year. Do you believe, Q, that the pressure is mounting here for this team, for this coaching staff, as well as maybe even some front office personnel? Seems like maybe a shift is in order. That is a consensus, but if they get some wins, maybe it saves it. But if they start to lose, I think the pressure is going to increase.
Again, we went into the season and you saw where they were talking about how it's a win now proposition. Steve Bisciotti was clear in the owners meeting when he was talking to Garrett Downs, and basically him and John Harbaugh was sitting there and they teed him up. And he was like, look, you know what? I'm not trying to look at the future. I'm looking about now. So with that said, the entire offseason was geared towards winning now. And it was a situation where, the roster via the draft, Malachi Starks before the draft, heck, rewarding Ronnie Stanley so he can come back and, be the anchor of the offensive line. All those things that kind of came about. Derrick Henry being re-signed as well. But, you were also getting the hype train of Daniel Faalele. Oh, Eric DeCosta was like ranting and raving about how he was a Pro Bowler. And you're like, wait a minute, what? He was like the alternate to the alternate because the other one hurt his toe when he was sick. And he had, kind of had to go to the podiatrist to get his hangnail removed. Like, bro, that's not no real Pro Bowl, ballot award. He was just, they had to fill in somebody, and he was the guy that they filled in. With that said, right now, like in my mind, this team is just barely hanging on by a thread. And they are playing. So, for example, when you look at going up against Cincinnati, they're the 32nd ranked defense, and they were on pace to be the league's worst defense ever, and you make them look like world beaters. You go ahead with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, was, in the first half anyway, making plays down the football field in the passing game, and their passing attack was god awful. So I guess in my mind, that's coaching. Like, again, going back to the fact that, you look at John Harbaugh, you look at Andy Reid, and Andy was in in Philadelphia for a very long time and was very successful, but couldn't get over the hump. So they let him go, and you saw the success for both organizations. That you shouldn't have to feel like, oh my God, John. We're not saying that you're a bad coach. We're just saying that your time has run out here, and it might be time to move on to elsewhere to other teams and see how you can bring in your philosophy of rebuilding on another team.
Yeah, again, it's all the stuff that we've talked about before. When you look at John Harbaugh and what he's done over the course of his Ravens career, I think the problem with the way that it has started versus the way that it is continuing is that, there was so much early playoff success for Harbaugh, the Super Bowl coming 5 years after he took over. But, you look at it now, and John Harbaugh over the last 10 seasons essentially only has 3 playoff wins total. And for a team that has largely been in contention for the entirety of his tenure, for a team that has had Lamar Jackson since the second half of 2018, I guess I'll start that timer at 2019 because Lamar didn't play the full season in 2018. But even still, you've had Lamar Jackson now. Lamar is going to be 29 next month. And, what you have is an AFC championship game. That's great. Couple divisional rounds. That's great. Wild card. That's great. But that's not the goal. The goal is consistent ascension. And while I'm not saying that every single year the Ravens need to make the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl, I mean, I'd love that. Like, please do that. But, realistically, that's not what is the expectation. The expectation is that even with some of the years where you get eliminated from the postseason, you can at least live with it because you can say, you know what, that team was just better, or you know what, they did the things necessary. But in that same vein, like I look back on 2019 when they went away from who they were, injuries played a part in that. But that 2023 season is going to haunt me forever. It's going to haunt me forever. They had it all set up. The roster was there. The coaching staff was there. They had it in place. They were dominating teams on the ground. And then you just go away from everything you are. And, you can talk about Todd Monken. He's the play caller. But whose staff is Todd Monken on? Who has final say? Who is the head coach? It is John Harbaugh. And when consistent things continue to pop up, like it becomes a major issue. One, that when you've had multiple coordinators pass through, both offensively and defensively, and I know Mike McDonald left on his own accord and went to Seattle, and that was that. But that was the plan, right? Like that was it. But the reality of it was they were never going to fire Harbaugh after the AFC Championship game, after getting there for the first time and having that game be in Baltimore for the first time. So, it was a huge, I think, and, I'd said this at the time, like I would have made the move and hired McDonald. But realistically, they were never going to do that. The only way that they could have done that was, I think, some like Harbaugh's going to the front office, but he would have never done. Like Harbaugh wants to coach. Harbaugh. So that's what I always say when people are talking about Greg Roman. They should demote Greg Roman to like run game coordinator. Greg Roman would leave before he got demoted. Like it's stuff along those lines where I think that 2023 season was such a missed opportunity for them. And I think that they had their coach in waiting. If they had won the Super Bowl that year, John Harbaugh could have ridden off happily into the sunset, and McDonald comes in and goes and takes over, and you have your guy. But now, while there are other options at this point, like, and I've made this comparison before on the show. I did it this week, but when Harbaugh's thing is the regular season and you lose that, what do you have left? When the playoff success hasn't been there, but the reason that you're keeping them around, at least one of them, is, hey, well, look, they'll win double-digit games every year. They'll be in contention for the playoffs every year. Well, when you lose that, what does he have left at this point, especially for a team that, like, we were talking Super Bowl or bust before this season, and now we're talking about just please squeak your way into the playoffs with an above 500 record. I mean, if they miss the playoffs, I think there has to be a change. And I've been consistent in saying this, so I'll say this again. If they don't make the AFC Championship game this year, which, spoiler alert, I do not think they're going to, there needs to be change, because every year you continue this, there's that like sliver of hope that they can turn it around. But in reality, it's like, how many times are you going to go back to that well? It's, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, where, again, like Harbaugh is better than a decent amount of coaches in the NFL right now. I'm not going to come on here and say that's not true. But at the same time, like you said, sometimes your time just runs out in a certain place. And it's like the Roman Monken thing, where Roman and Lamar in 2019, unstoppable. One of the best offenses we've seen in history. But the offense grew stale. They needed someone to take it to the next level. And while they probably moved on from Roman a year or two too late, they bring Todd Monken in. And all of a sudden, we see that ascension. So it's not about Harbaugh, to me, being a bad coach. He certainly has his flaws, and I'm not running away from those. Every coach does, but Harbaugh's in particular have become thorns at some points. But to me, sometimes you just need to take that next step, and sometimes that means moving on from a guy that has meant so much to your organization for so many years. But we do know the Ravens are loyal, sometimes loyal to a fault. And like I've said over and over again, I'd rather have a loyal organization than a non-loyal organization. But at the same time, when changes need to happen, they have shown, whether it be Steve Saunders or Greg Roman or others, it sometimes takes a little while. But I just don't know how you could justify bringing Harbaugh back, because at the end of the day, what are you going to do? Like, fire Chris Horton? Fire the special teams? Like, you've gone through so many options that at this point, all roads to me lead back to John Harbaugh, and I've been consistently saying that for a little while now.
Well said.
Sorry for the rant. So I know I went on a little bit there. Sorry for the rant.
There,
I went on my Q rant. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. It's very, no notes. I can't disagree with any of that. Yeah, very impressive Q rant.
I learned from the best Q. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I said it is Super Bowl or bust for John Harbaugh. He needs to find a way to get it done here. The only thing is, and this is where the optimism comes in, and probably shouldn't be there. This team isn't very different roster-wise from the team of last year. The personnel is the same, aside from Patrick McCary and Nnamdi Madubuike being out with injury. Besides that, this is pretty much the same team, and they've regressed tremendously. I mean, just almost, it's astronomical, the type of change that we've seen here from a play standpoint. And that's why everybody's pointing fingers to Lamar Jackson, but it's not just him. It's all across the board. This team doesn't seem to have it. Q, do you agree with Kevin's sentiment? Do you think that this is it for John Harbaugh if he doesn't make it to the AFC Championship at least?
I mean, that's what I'm looking at. Like, the great point that Kevin made was that, look, if you are regular season John and you just be balling through the regular season, but you can't get to the postseason, and now you're in danger of missing out on the postseason, you're still in control. You got to win out. You win out, you're going to be able to get into the postseason. That's what we see as far as all the different scenarios. But if you don't win out and you do stumble and you are on the outside looking in, well, then that means you didn't get it done during the regular season. And I think it's time for you to move on. And I also think, again, going back to the point that, yeah, okay, well, what if you are one and done? I mean, I think that's where a new voice, new, fresh thoughts, and the whole 9 yards comes in to change things around. You did away with Pete Carroll in Seattle. You brought in a new, fresh face in McDonald, and it worked itself out too. So you got to miss me with all the sentiment of like, oh, we can't find another coach. Yeah, you can. There are plenty out there. You just got to look. And I think even that model of head coach dynamic with general manager. You might even have to look at a new general manager as well, and not just the head coach being let go, because you might as well just clean house and really look at the bigger picture of how they're trying to set everything up. That to me, I think really makes a huge difference in this process. If we're talking about getting rid of John Harbaugh, you need to take a hard look at EDC and what has he done or hasn't done in helping this team succeed.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely. I mean, there's nothing left to say. I mean, I want John Harbaugh to succeed. I think he's a great coach, like Kevin pointed out, but this is a results-driven league. I mean, you got to get the job done. So you got Lamar Jackson. There's not many teams that can say that. I mean, nobody can say that except for the Ravens. There's 4 quarterbacks in the league who have a legitimate claim to being the best quarterback in football. Patrick Mahomes has more championships than some of us have fingers. I mean, sorry to those that are dealing with those injuries, but that's the way it is. I mean, and you got Joe Burrow, who's been to the championship. You got Josh Allen, who's winning most likely his division, most likely. Well, he's fighting with the Patriots, but he's still going to make the postseason and have a real shot. If I was a contender, if I was a better, I'd say Josh Allen has a good chance to win because he's one of the 4 QBs left to get it done. And then you have Lamar Jackson, who is probably not going to make it to postseason unless a miracle happens.
Isn't that the most frustrating thing about this, guys? That the
Yes.
AFC is so wide open this season. Like the Chiefs probably aren't even going to make the postseason this year without a miracle. Like you talked about with Josh, like he'll make the postseason, but that Bills team has looked weak, especially defensively. Like, Patriots, really good team this year. Broncos, really good team this year. But there are questions about, all right, can the regular season success translate over to the postseason with a younger team with a younger quarterback? It just feels like, and again, like you have Jacksonville, Houston, like all these teams that are vying for spots. It just feels like if things had gone a little bit differently for the Ravens, and maybe that literally just all is week 1. Like maybe because we've heard like reports have come out about like how that week 1 game broke this team a little bit. And I don't blame them because that game was heartbreaking. But, you have to be able to move on from that when you're in that seat. And it's just like, I think the Ravens had a real opportunity again here. And while it's not like it's a different opportunity than they had in 2019, 2023, and even last year, because they're just not as good as those years this season. But I think the AFC is a lot weaker than it was in those years that we're talking about. So, it's frustrating from that mindset too. But, at the end of the day, I'll say this about, John Harbaugh and some of, coaches have been fired for less. Coaches have been fired for less. And, while, I'm sure Steelers fans are probably having that same conversation about Mike Tomlin over there with all his above 500 records and whatnot. But that's what we're kind of seeing, right? Like, even in Buffalo, some fans are really upset about Sean McDermott and how he's handled things. It's like some of these longer tenured coaches, and I know Harbaugh and Tomlin are like in their own category there, but some of these longer tenured coaches on teams that should be contending every single season are upset with the complacency, because I would rather be all the way bad and get a high draft pick than be all the way mediocre at 9-8 and get like the 17th pick every year. And the Ravens have proved they can draft in that range, but it just kind of delays the inevitable when like you need to get like pick a direction essentially. Like with Lamar Jackson, your direction should be competing every single season. But is John Harbaugh the right coach to do that at this point? The playoff success hasn't been there. Now, like I mentioned, with that regular season success, all bets are off, I have to feel like right now. But again, you just never know with this organization.
Never know. They better get the job done. That's all I'm saying. find a way. It starts with the Cincinnati Bengals, and when we come back, we'll be talking about that Bengals matchup, rematch between these two teams. The Ravens have got to win this game if they're to have any chance of creeping back into the conversation, even though they're one game behind. The Steelers do own the tiebreaker, and the Steelers have two matchups against the Browns and Dolphins that they should be favored to win. So the Ravens, who are favorites in this contest, will need to do so, get the job done, and hopefully we're having a different conversation next week. But we'll touch on this matchup next here on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. Okay. This is NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds, every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or momentum flips after a turnover. We saw that against the Bengals and the Bills. That pick six for the Bengals helped out the Ravens a ton, but also helped out the Bills pick up the win. FanDuel lets you jump into that moment with these betting. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. For instance, currently the Ravens, as I mentioned before the break, are 2.5-point favorites against the Bengals team that beat them by double digits last time. Right now, the odds are looking at -146. So if you think the Ravens have a chance to get that done, you may want to head over to FanDuel to place that bet. Player props update as guys heat up as well. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Welcome back to the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. Myself, Kevin O, Q, talking Ravens football as we prepare for a pivotal matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. Stop me if you heard this before. The Ravens are in a must-win game here. Again, for another week, the Ravens have to get the job done. The Ravens are looking pretty, winning all those games in a row, but have since fallen to two straight divisional foes. The Ravens are going against three straight foes. One sandwiched between two matchups against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals were not the favorite. They were the underdogs on Thanksgiving. Found a way to win. They were 7-point underdogs. Now they're down to 2.5 because they looked really good on Thanksgiving, and the Ravens have not looked great. We're going to start talking about the Ravens offense versus this Bengals defense, and I want to start with talking about one Isaiah Likely. Isaiah Likely had a pretty decent game against the Bengals. He didn't get the job done. He fumbled at the goal line, something that Ravens fans, unfortunately, are very familiar with. Fumbling at the goal line was not in the cards for a lot of Ravens fans. I know for one, I was hoping that he wouldn't do so. But then the next week, he catches the game-winning touchdown in the end zone. Whether or not you agree with the rules or not, he was supposed to make a football move, at least hold on to the football. He did not do so. Dennis Pitta actually spoke about this, former Ravens tight end. He says, I'm going to put some blame on Isaiah Likely for that Steelers loss. Cincinnati was an issue. He was nonchalant with the football, a completely unnecessary play. If you go back to the Pittsburgh Steelers game, he could have caught it and clutched it. He did not. So this Ravens offense is, they're doing some crazy things right now. But Isaiah Likely, hopefully part of the solution right now, part of the problem. Kevin, how would you assess the Ravens' chances on offense against this Bengals defense?
Yeah, I know my tweet when I hear it. I read
it verbatim. Good job.
Yeah.
Q and I talked about those comments this morning on the show. So if you want more in-depth, and we'll talk about it here too, but if you want more in-depth, be sure to check out the show Q and I did. But yeah, that was from 98 Rock Baltimore. And essentially, I think that the key to this game, honestly, is going to be the tight ends. And I actually recorded a crossover Thursday episode for tomorrow morning with James Rapine of Locked On Bengals. And, we talked about how the Bengals have struggled all year, but specifically a lot recently with tight ends. Against the Bills, Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid were the Bills' leading two receivers, 10 receptions on 12 targets for 134 combined yards and a touchdown. And then even Jackson Hawes, who is their third string tight end, caught the game-winning touchdown. He won reception for 3 yards and a score. So 2 touchdowns and almost 140 yards to their tight end unit the Bengals gave up. I think Likely, Andrews, and Kohler are going to be the keys to the game here. And Likely did have, outside of that fumble, which obviously is a big moment in the game, but we kind of saw him with a couple of those catches, long plays. So this has to be a bounce back moment for Isaiah. He's been on the receiving end of a couple, or I guess he has been a part of a couple of really poor plays. And, something, and Q and I had the conversation this morning about how you should be, especially on that touchdown play, either extending or clutching in the football, and how you are taught in those moments. And obviously I've never caught a ball in the NFL. I don't know what that's like. So of course it's cool to have a guy who has to actually ask that question. And Dennis has too. And even John Harbaugh had said, yeah, no, that's not how we want him to catch the football, when he was asked about it during his media availability earlier in the week. So I think Isaiah's showing flashes, but the problem is it's sandwiched between a couple of really game-changing plays. And look, I think that play should have been a touchdown regardless. Like, I'll stand on that. Like, it shouldn't have come to the way it was, and it should have been points, meaning points being touchdown. But at the end of the day, like, Mark Andrews, coming off of his big contract, only had 1 catch for 9 yards, and that was at the very, very end of the game when the Ravens were trying to drive down the field and win. Charlie Kohler had a catch late on that 2-minute drive as well. But, like, these tight ends do need to step up, and it's not just them, it's the passing offense in general. We know that. But if you allow the Bengals, and this is kind of what happened on Thanksgiving, if you allow the Bengals to thrive in their weaknesses, you're going to have a bad time. If you allow any team to do that, because essentially you want to attack what do we see every single week with the Ravens? Offensive line, attack, defenses, attack that Ravens offensive line, because that's the weakness. For the Bengals, their weakness on defense is their tight end coverage. So I think the Ravens need to attack that, but how do you start that? It has to all go back to the run game. Establish your run game early. Then those play action plays, and with Lamar using his legs a little more in that Pittsburgh game, that gives me a little hope that they'll use him a little more in this Cincinnati game. You're going to have to go on the road and win a big one, and I think it does start with Isaiah Likely in those tight ends.
Yeah, I think that when you listen to like a Kyle Hamilton, for example, and he talks about playing complementary football in his press conference, and the hope that they have for one another, and they haven't played complementary football consistently enough, but they still believe in one another inside that locker room. I think that's great. I think it goes to the leadership of the guys, knowing that their backs are against the wall, knowing that it's going to be impossible odds, but you have a chance to fix it. You have a chance to finish off a game. You have a chance to put yourself in position where, play ball. Like, let's go. Let's not sit there and shoulda, woulda, coulda. Well, I was about to make that play, but, or I thought I heard your call, I wasn't sure, or yeah, I just wanted to take it on my own and make it happen. None of that can happen. Not offensively, not defensively, and especially not special teams. I think this is really a true. How many gut check moments do we have left for them to utilize? But yeah, this is really it. I mean, you've run out. This is your last one, best one, and if you take advantage of it, cool. But otherwise, from a gut check standpoint, this is it. Like, there is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow. Woo, boy, don't get me in that locker room, bro. I'll be so hyped and amped, man. We ain't losing. As a matter of fact, I saw Brandon Stokely at my reunion. Oh, KO, you about to get me on a rant.
There you go.
What did I do?
And we were sitting there, him, Travis Taylor, myself, Billy Davis, and we were just talking about our 2000 year, and the Cincinnati Bengals game came up. We had not scored a touchdown in those 5 weeks, and it was frustrating because a lot of it had to do with just poor quarterback play. Trent Dilfer goes in, but Trent was kind of up and down and not really slinging it the right way. And, the receivers were taking a ton of flack as far as not being able to score. And, once the ball got to the red zone and Matt Stover, Money Matt was doing his thing. As soon as the ball got inside the 30-yard line, it was like, all right, cool, let's go. Let's kick it. Well, Cincinnati was the coming out game. Like, all right, bro. And I was like, man, I remember that pregame locker room. I brought my boys together. I was like, hey, man, I'm going to tell y'all this right now. We're going out there. We're going to prove ourselves. And we're going to block. because we were like, oh, we're gonna run the football right down their throats. We get into the red zone, we're gonna score. When we get an opportunity to make a play, we're gonna make a play, but we're gonna stay on the field. So we did. We matriculated the ball down the field, and it was like, mindset was we all in this together. And we wound up going down. Obviously, Brandon Stokely goes ahead and scores and breaks the 5-game streak. But it's who in this locker room will kind of be that guy, like offensively, and we ain't having no drops. We ain't having no let the referee decide whether it's a pass interference or whether it's a catch. We're not gonna have the referee trip out on us. We're gonna make the assertive play. We're gonna make the sure play, and that's the standard that you need to have, because this is it. This decides it all. This coming week, this decides it all. Period. End of discussion. Rant over.
Another rant. 2 rants in the show.
Yeah,
one
2
from
for
each you
1.
guys. I mean, I don't got a rant in me, guys, so don't expect it, but that's really awesome if you got 2 in a row. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, somebody in this team is going to have to make a play, put it on themselves. And I think we need some leadership here. Someone in this team needs to stoke the fires a little bit. I think, Kevin, you mentioned it. After that week 1 loss, a lot of players reported that, they feel like that was the turning point for them. And I don't think that happens if you have leadership on the football field, and as well as the coaching staff to turn it around. 1 loss shouldn't dictate a season, and no injuries were a part of it, but it just feels like there hasn't been anyone there to get this team together and give them a chance. You got guys like Roquan Smith and Kyle Hamilton that's coming to his own, but I think we need more of that, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Somebody on offense to be that leader and step up. I don't know. I'm not sure if Lamar's that guy. I think Lamar's been on record as saying he's not the rah-rah guy, but they need somebody to go up there and push this offense, because, again, Kevin, you mentioned it. The tight ends in this game could have themselves a day against the Bengals defense that struggles to stop any type of passes towards that possession group. So very interesting to see what happens in that game. I think this offense will need to be very good, because that Bengals offense is coming. Joe Burrow put up 30+ against the Ravens, and then again against the Bills in a losing effort. We'll touch on what this Bengals defense could be doing, what this Bengals offense could do against this Ravens defense next here on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. We are back here, Locked On Ravens Squad Show, with myself, Kevin Oestreicher, Kadri Ismail. Locked On Ravens Squad Show twice a week, Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and once after every Ravens game. The next one upcoming is on Sunday. A couple of primetime games after that, so we'll be here late. Much of chagrin as some co-hosts of the show.
Q's excited.
I wasn't going to say any names, but there's a couple of people that may not be too excited about being up at 2 o'clock on the Ravens Squad Show. A lot of you Ravens fans tuned in, so we will certainly be there to give you that content. Also, the Locked On Ravens podcast with Kevin 5 days a week, and even on the weekends, depending on the news. Make sure you tune in and support Kevin as he continues to give you news all day, every day, even during the offseason, which is spectacular. So make sure you guys show support with the show. Ravens, Bengals, we talked on it. The Ravens got to get this job done. The Ravens offense has a good chance to bounce back after that Thanksgiving game against that Bengals defense, but it's Joe Burrow that seems to be getting in the groove. We thought after that toe injury coming in, first game on Thursday, may be a little rusty. Didn't see too much rust there, but the Ravens certainly held the Bengals to 4 field goals to start the game. Can't expect that in the red zone against Joe Burrow, against the Ravens defense this time around. At least I wouldn't think. Q, what do you think the Ravens have to do to slow down Joe Burrow? They weren't able to put him on the ground. They didn't do so against Aaron Rodgers either. They blitzed a ton, but the Bengals did a really good job of picking up on the blitz in that first meeting. Do you think the Ravens shy away from the blitz and try and use coverage to slow down this Bengals offense that continues to hum, even with the return of Joe Burrow? 9 toes Joe Burrow, as Bengals fans are calling him.
Concerned, to be honest with you, because in the first Bengals game, you had a scenario where they were max protecting and they couldn't get to Joe Burrow. And then when they got to him, they weren't able to finish. And it looked like this version of Odafe Owe, no way, almost, when he was here with the Ravens. Now, obviously, he's no longer here. And, Jalen Hurts is like, dang, I was ready to go ahead and make a play down the field. Now, all of a sudden, I'm getting sacked by some Odafe Owe guy. What the heck? I digress. You got to get to Joe Burrow. You got to figure out what it is that you're not doing effectively to get to Joe Burrow. And I think that you know, Draymond, whether it be KBN, whether it be Mike Green, one or all three need to get him. Travis Jones, like, bruh, you know, playing well, playing solid, but again, this is it. This is where you define yourself, or you sit back and do nothing and you go home. You guys up front will dictate the win opportunity for your ball club. Pressuring him, getting that turnover is going to be of the utmost. Because if you look at it, when the Bills were playing, like that offense was humming along and they were scoring. And obviously, T. Higgins, we don't know if T. Higgins is going to play. I highly, highly doubt it. I were advising him. I'd be like, nah, bro, that was two major hits to the back of the head, to the turf in the Bills game on a frozen surface. That's you're talking longevity. But with that said, you also are saying we got to figure out how to get to Joe Burrow, similarly to what we saw when Christian Benford came off the edge, sacked Joe. Christian Benford came off the edge, jumped up, batted a ball up in the air, intercepted it, pick six. And then I think linebacker had pressured Joe and was able to get an interception as well. So my point is that it's out there for the taking. Now who's going to be the aggressor and go out there and take it?
Yeah, Cincy's defense makes life easy for me, but Cincinnati's offense is the only one because, when you talk about stats-wise, when I look at Cincy's defense, you're just worse across the board almost every single – it's easy to just say 32, 32, 31, 32, 32. But that Cincinnati offense is starting to find their groove. And not that really – I mean, Joe Flacco came in there and, you look at some of those losses, I'd be – incensed if that was the rain. They're losing games 50-49. I'm just like, defense, do something. And this is Joe Flacco we're talking about. But now that Joe Burrow is back, and we kind of saw it over that Thanksgiving game, right? Where Joe was definitely feeling things out early in that game. He was missing a couple throws, but then it's Joe Burrow. And then kind of like what Q, you were saying, if you rush and you don't get there, that's 6 points. That's a 30-yard gain like that. And that's what we saw a couple of times where Ravens players overrushed, the pressure didn't get there. And that is when you're talking about some of the elite quarterbacks in this league, like Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Lamar, et cetera, et cetera. When you rush those guys and the pressure doesn't get there and you're leaving those receivers, especially when you have someone, you might have heard of this guy named Jamar Chase, when he's one-on-one, he's gonna cook you, especially when his favorite team to play is the Ravens. So for me in the Cincy offense, the thing with them, in particular with this Ravens team, is that when the Ravens offense is on their P's and Q's and doing their thing and they're humming along and high-powered, there's barely any team in the NFL that can keep up with them. One of the only teams that can is the Cincinnati Bengals. And when we see what the Ravens offense has done over this last month plus, essentially, when they can't keep up with Cincinnati, then it turns into what we saw at the end of that game. So that's why it was so important early on that the Ravens defense was holding the Bengals to field goals, because you're like, okay, at some point the Bengals offense is going to find something with Burrow and Chase. The offense just has to be able to respond to it because they were playing off their back foot in that game. That never happened. And then, of course, the floodgates open, and that is what it is. Ideally, this game goes similarly to what happened with the Bills and the Bengals, where the Bengals are going to get theirs offensively. I'm anticipating that again. But it's the Bills offense that, again, was responding to those scores with scores of their own. And that's not what we saw in the game against Cincy that the Ravens played on Thanksgiving. So if the Ravens can respond to the Bengals offensively and stay in the game that way, because I think Cincinnati will get theirs, then you have a shot to come out with this win, especially because I trust Baltimore's defense more than Cincinnati's. But even still, you have to find a way, because like we've talked about with the offensive line all season, what have they shown us to make us believe it? Well, what has this offense shown us over the last month to make us believe they will turn it around? I will say, I thought they found something in the second half of that Steelers game a little bit. So I'm hoping that they can kind of latch onto that magic and continue that. But, you know, the slow starts just cannot happen. You cannot have the slow starts that you've had over the last handful of weeks here. So that to me is another key, because if your offense starts slow, the Bengals offense doesn't start slow, and you go down 17-3 to the Bengals, not the Steelers, you're going to be in trouble.
You would be in a world of hurt. Just a note, and then you mentioned it, T. Higgins in that concussion protocol right now. He was limited in practice on Wednesday, but yeah, it looks like his availability for this game is in doubt, which is, you know, you wish him the best, but great news for the Ravens. Joseph Asai, somebody who had a lot of success against the Ravens in that Thanksgiving game. He was a full participant in practice with a shin injury. Shamar Stewart, we didn't see him in that first contest. Dealing with an injury, he was brought back, designated return to practice from a reserve list. Doubt he plays in this contest. Trey Hendrickson, he's most likely out for the season, had surgery. He did not participate in practice either. So there are guys out there for the Bengals who are a little banged up, especially on offense with T. Higgins, giving the Ravens a chance to do some work, hopefully finding a way to contain Jamar Chase without giving up the big play with the blitz. I think that's the secret sauce to this game. And I think Tavius Robinson returning does help this team out quite a bit, especially when it comes to stopping the run. They don't need to put too much into it, even though Chase Brown is an option for this offense. I'd be interesting to see what the Bengals do when it comes to running the football with Chase Brown. But I think Tavius Robinson, maybe putting too much on him to get healthy and come back and contribute right away. But I think he could set the edge a little bit and maybe give a little bit of room for guys like Calvin Oy and Mike Green to be true pass rush specialists. And we'll see if that makes a difference. It'll have to, for sure. But before we go, we got to do predictions. I know it's Wednesday. Love doing predictions early in the week because you guys hold us to it anyway, even though we haven't got the full picture. Q, I'll start with you. Ravens, Bengals, who gets the job done?
Well, I think that your back is up against the wall. I think that judging by Kyle Hamilton's comments and the presser that he had, I think they are recognizing they need to play complementary football. All three phases need to show up. They haven't done it all year. I think they get it done. I think for whatever the reason, they're going to pull it out. And I think it could be as easy as a 35-30 score just because of the way the other team can score points. But I think the critical fourth quarter is where we're going to see the Ravens defense say enough as far as scoring and the offense go ahead and get it done as far as them putting up points and scoring.
Yeah, I've been such a hater of the Cincinnati defense for multiple years. I cannot have it where this defense dominates Baltimore for 2 straight games. So I'm going to say that doesn't happen. They go on the road and pick up a big win. And sheesh, I mean, I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. But actually, what Tanya said there is you better tell Monkey you can't sleepwalk through the whole first half. I mean, that's true. You can't start slow here. I mean, if you want to keep up with Cincinnati, it's going to be a full 60 minutes. You know, you can't go out there and play 30 minutes and expect to keep up with the Bengals, especially because Joe now has a couple of games under his belt. So I'll say the Ravens win this one 33-31. I kind of want to pick the Bengals to reverse jinx it, but I'm gonna pick the Ravens 33-31, and I feel less confident in this game than I did against the Steelers, which kind of tells me something about, you know, where I am on the confidence level in this team that I have.
Well, I'll reverse jinx it for you because I think the Bengals do pick up the victory. I think that the Ravens haven't shown me much. I know the defense of the Bengals is terrible, but that Joe Burrow is looking really good. And unless that defense can hold him off from reaching the end zone, just keep him away from the red zone multiple times. I mean, holding them to field goals was great in the first matchup. Keep them out of the red zone. Make this Ravens offense, find the rhythm, give them time. And maybe you get a little touchdown magic from both Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. Maybe you get the double pump celebration from Isaiah Likely. I envisioned that in the end zone for those FanDuel bettors out there. So hopefully the Ravens get the job done. I just don't see it. I'll take the Bengals. Hopefully the reverse jinx works and the Ravens are right back in it for the AFC North title. That's going to do it for myself, Kevin Oestreicher, and Kadri Ismail. Thank you guys so much for joining us here on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show, and we will see you guys on Sunday.